Hey, good morning, everybody. It's Jason with JR Custom Designs. Today I want to go over autofocus and take general questions and answers from people about how to use it and stuff like that. Good morning, everybody. Jason with JR Custom Designs. Sorry, I forgot to mute my live feed there, so I had to mute it. So yeah, going over just this autofocus. That seems to be a pretty interesting topic right now. I personally use it every time. Unless if I'm working with the same material and stuff like that, I won't use it over and over. I'll set it for the particular material I'm using, and I'll use it for that whole run of material, with half inch, 3/4, flexi, whatever. But and some people have problems with that, I guess, not functioning properly. Um, it's a pretty fail-safe system, the way the switches are set up and what the switch is. The only times myself that I've had a problem with it is when usually on the rotor, the rotary, and it's because I forgot to or failed to center up my piece properly, and in doing so, it allowed the nozzle to kick to the side and not allow it to lift up and make the switch like it's supposed to. So I mean that's really the only problem that I've had with it. You know, other people I can't speak for, but um, that's just my experience with this autofocus. Um, I've had several different lasers. I've had the China lasers and stuff that have the probe, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, the Gen 3 and 4 also had the probe that's mounted off to the side to do the autofocus. Um, those had a lot of failure issues with them. For me personally, I had to replace mine because it just the switch inside would fail, and or the wire would break or something like that, and it wouldn't sense. Of course, on the other lasers, it's easier to just have a thin piece of material like plexiglass or acrylic or something that's cut to the thickness you want, and slide it up underneath there and just lift, raise and lower the nozzle. So it's pretty simple. But with this, with the spring, it's a little bit harder to do that. But anyways, um, so right here, what I got a couple of different views of what I'm going to be doing. Mainly, we'll be sticking, I think, with this one. Just trying to find the right lighting to where it's not bothering the view itself. Um, I don't think that really helped, and I don't think that really helped either. But so I just try to get set up right, get a good view. I think that's a good view right there. Um, so on the autofocus itself, I'll go, I think, to this camera, and now if you look, sorry, I got a junk open. Different work I've been doing. But at any rate, um, so let's. I'm trying to show you this camera. The camera. It's not gonna work. Let me. That's not working. Alright, so anyways, here we are, RDworks. We'll get into that a little bit later once I go over the nozzle stuff. So pretty much, like I said, what we're going over, if you look at the, the picture here, right up behind there, right up behind here, you have your autofocus switch, and this has to go up and down. If it doesn't go up and down evenly, then it could cause the switch not to make. Yes, these can fail, but the way they're designed, or the way they're made, the type of switch they are, it's not very likely. Usually the nozzle will get shifted off to the side and it won't go up, or if you put it on a glass. Actually, I did it to a piece of wood, but I didn't have the tip of the nozzle centered onto the piece of wood I was using. It was a round piece of wood on the roller, and when I drove it down, the nozzle kicked to the side, and the table kept going. It didn't damage the head, but it bent the material because it sandwiched it between the frame and the bed itself before I stopped it. And I've had it break glass before. It's not uncommon. It's just part of doing business. To me, not using autofocus, especially if you do like I do, and I bounce between materials and objects and things all the time, I don't have time to sit there with a ruler and measure it and all that. But I will, however, I wouldn't say frequently, but I would say, at least once a month or more, I would check my pulse to make sure I still got a good circle, and I still got a small dot. Because I have had this up here where these screws are. I've had these come out of adjustment ever so slightly, and usually you can tell when you look at your dot. No, stop moving. When you look at your dot, which you can't see there you go. If you look at your dot and it's kind of oval shaped, or it's really hazy or cloudy looking, typically means that the cone, if I move the cone, see how the dot kind of gets fuzzy and big versus right there? Sometimes it'll move and you'll be able to see like part of the dot just kind of showing up right there on the edge of the halo. And if it's not centered like it is now, it won't fire. It'll hit the inside of the cone and you'll get a burn around the edge, one of the edges, as it's cutting or engraving, mainly for cutting if this isn't set straight. And another thing is, like, when you're adjusting this, is to not be afraid of using these. Really simple, especially if your LED or your laser pointer is actually working as it should. And that's easy to check. Is you just send a pulse and see where the red dot lines up with your actual laser dot. But even if it's not in, once you get used to it, you can tell, like, when there's a halo on one side or the other, you basically go the opposite direction to center it. And I usually only use this top screw here on the outside and the bottom screw on the inside. And the reason for that is I want this back corner to be my constant. I don't want that to change at all. And I can tilt left and right just by using this screw, and I can tilt up and down just by using the back screw over here. And generally you have to use them in conjunction to kind of move your dot closer to the closer to the center. And a good way to do that is just look at your dot head on with the look at it head on, and you can tell by looking in the shot there that the dot is pretty much dead center. Usually I'll look at it from the front, line it up, and then I'll look at it from the left or the right and line it up that way. That way, I mean, at least you got the 90 degree, you got 2 points of your X and your Y axis basically that you're covering, allowing you to see if it's centered or not. And then of course once you're done doing that, you can just do a pulse and it'll tell you right there if it's centered. If you got a nice crisp dot in the center, then you're good. Now if you shoot the beam and your dot's a little off center, you can still adjust it. Again, with those screws, depending on where the dot is, you can adjust it. And I'll go over that here in a second. I'll take mine out of alignment and I'll show you what I'm doing to fix it and how I'm fixing it. But anyways, now if you don't have autofocus, like say you switch out a lens. This is my 4-inch lens on here. Let's say that I just changed it out from a 2-inch lens. Obviously, your autofocus depth is not going to be the same, and you're going to have to fix that in RDworks. Okay, so the first thing you want to do with the machine on is you want to go to RDworks itself, and then you'll go up here to users. Actually, you're not seeing all that, are you? Hold on a second. Alright, that's better. So anyways, so you go up here to users. Click on users. You're gonna see all your different stuff here. Now this is, come on now. Then you go to other, and that's where you're gonna find your circle pulse for your rotary and all that stuff, and then your focus depth. Okay. Now right now mine's at 10.8, and I can verify that by hitting read right here at the bottom. You hit read, it'll ask, it'll check the machine's settings and parameters, and it gives you a read back, and it verifies that 10.8 is what I have. Now, anytime you do autofocus, no matter if you're switching lenses or you're switching positions of the lenses, it doesn't really matter. Anytime you do autofocus, you want to do an autofocus before you change or get any numbers. Okay, so if I hit autofocus right now, which is not in focus at the moment, but if I hit autofocus right now, it's going to go through the autofocus cycle. When it's done, you can look at your screen on the laser, and it'll tell you what your autofocus or your Z height is. Because before you do it, it's going to say something like 3,000, which is just an arbitrary number that's out there. It doesn't have any bearing on what the machine does. Because if you're using the same material when you start the machine up, it's going to be the same spot, so it doesn't really matter. But what that does is just giving you an arbitrary number saying, hey, I need to know where I'm at. So when you hit autofocus, it'll get that reading, which is 10.8, and then let's say you have now with a 4-inch lens, or with the 4-inch lens, it's supposed to be 10.8. With the stock lens, it's usually 5.3 to 5.6, somewhere in that area. So I'm going to write that to the machine. Now I'm going to read it. It says 5.5. Okay, so what you do, you want to change it. Like for mine, for my instance here, 4-inch lens, I know it's 10.8. And after a while you do this, you'll kind of get the numbers yourself as well, so it'll be quicker. So I want 10.8, so I want the 10.8, and then you have to write it. So as soon as you're done with that, you hit write. Now it's going to write to the machine. Now, if you want to verify it, you hit read. It'll read the machine, and it'll tell you that it's 10.8. So that's how you fix it here. based off of the numbers on the machine itself. Um, but you just remember you have to do autofocus first, because without doing that, you're basically the machine has no idea where it's at, and it could go anywhere. It could crash. It could bottom out. The Z-Min, Z-Max, all that stuff could go, crap. So you have to make sure you give it a point of reference by doing an autofocus first. Now, if the machine's on and running like right now, if I don't turn off the machine, I could go in there and change lenses and just go ahead and change my number right then and there, because the machine already knows where it's at. Because you didn't shut it down, it didn't restart or anything. So the machine already knows where it's at, so it doesn't matter. You can adjust your numbers from there and just go right on to your next project if you know your numbers. Now these numbers can change by 0.1, 0.2, or whatever when you're changing a lens, because if you're not careful, if you look at get you the right. If you look here on this collar, there's a threaded nut up here at the top. It holds this down and keeps tension on it. Now if it's too loose or too tight, it could cause it to shift, or it comes up hard, and if you're using glass or something, it could potentially break the glass if it's too tight. But you can adjust this if you need to. All you do is to loosen the top, or take the top ones off here, the normal ones you take off when removing the bottom piece, and just tighten this down or loosen it up depending on how it is. You don't want it to be flopping around. You want it to be nice and firm, but you don't want it so tight that when you're trying to do autofocus, it won't go up and down freely. Because if this binds at all and doesn't go up, then it'll cause it to fail. Now, I don't know if there's anybody watching or not, but if you got any questions or anything regarding this, please feel free to ask, or just general questions. I'll go over the two. And like always, I don't claim to be an expert. And if I can't get to the answer, I'll find someone that can. But this video in particular was just brought up because the topic of people using autofocus came up the past couple of days. And some people completely against it, some people completely for it, and some people have no clue. i.e. people that probably never used the machine or haven't got theirs yet, so they're kind of wondering. But with this head in particular for Boss, I mean, it's out of all the lasers I've had, this is the best autofocus system that I've used. I've used there's two different types of probes. I've used both of those. I've used this head here. I've done, well, the manual autofocus with the plexiglass and the old China lasers, and I think, like I said, the Gen 3, Gen 4 Boss, you could actually slide the tube up and down to set your focus. So I've used all the different kinds that are out there, and this one here is by far, I haven't had any problems with it, but that weren't caused by myself. You know, I've seen people on here in the past where they have actually failed, and that is possible. I mean, it's a tool, it's metal, it's machinery, it's electronics. It's due to fail, and fail without warning sometimes. But the way these switches are, I mean, they're almost fail safe, I would say. But again, it comes down to the sensing, which is the head, the spring part of the head that helps sense for autofocus. Now, if you're doing autofocus and someone you say, what's the best autofocus for a 2-inch lens? Mine's 10.8. Yours might be 11.2. Yours might be 10.4, 10.5, or something else. So it's not gonna be the same particularly for each one, because every switch, those switches are probably put in there in a factory, mass produced, and they do have a little slop to them to where they can move around, so they might not all get set the same. Because my machine came set at 5.5, whereas someone I talked to a few days ago, theirs was from the factory at 5.3. So there's obviously not a set number. So just use the numbers that you get and kind of play with it from there to see what works. And the easiest way to do that is going to be what I'm going to go over this time, or right now, is I'm going to go over how to find your focus. I mean, you can do a ramp test. You can do, there's all different kinds of things. You can take a piece of plexiglass, stick it up underneath there, and see if it's the right, if it's in the right spot or not. I've never used that. I used to use it on my old China lasers to verify the probe or set the probe autofocus depth, but for this I've never used it because it's never been accurate. And I don't know why that is or whose fault it is. I guess it really doesn't matter, but I just look at with my eye and see where I see the best dot. So I'm going to go ahead and fire up the chiller so I can do some pulse tests, and we can see kind of what we have going on. So right now my laser is well beyond where it should be for autofocus. And here's a split of the two angles, so you can kind of look from a couple different angles. So anyways, if you're looking at it here, you can kind of see the dot kind of goes away. I just like to pull up on my autofocus, or my nozzle right here. I'll just pull up on it a couple times just to make sure that it's centered, because it can get cocked to the side, which could cause problems. Now I gotta keep my hand over so you can see it. Right. I don't know. Anyways, so obviously you can tell that it's not in focus right now. The beam's really scattered, and there's no defined point. I know it looks like it on the screen, but there's no defined point. So what I want to do first is I want to go do my autofocus. Let it do its autofocus. All right. So now I know where it's starting from previously. Now this is still set at 10.8, but I'm going to drive it down to I'm going to drive it down to 5.5 and kind of show you how I'm getting where I'm at. Okay, it's 5.7, close enough. So now I want to do a pulse. And I like to blow. I like to blow air across it when it's doing a pulse. That way the smoke doesn't get sucked up into the nozzle, which it will anyways. But now what I'm going to do is I'll move it out of the way. You can kind of see the dot, right? You see how big it is. So from there, I'll usually just move it over, and then I'm going to raise the table. Let's say, all right, there's 8.4. So now I'm going to do another pulse. Okay, so I can tell it's getting smaller. I can tell the dot's getting smaller from what it was. All right, and at this point, if you don't have to, you don't want to adjust your dot, because if you look at this here, I mean, it's going to be at an angle. But if you can see that, see where the dot is? The dot's just to the right on the nozzle, so it's not lined up with the cone. But as long as you have a good solid dot there, you can continue with the test. But once you find your depth, if you get a nice crisp hole, then you don't need to mess with it. Because once you get your depth for the cone, which is your final depth that you're going to use, then you'll worry about centering up your dot. Because otherwise you'll just be chasing your tail trying to set it up every time, because depending on how close it gets to the material, the dot could shift a little bit. So now I want to go to, let's say, there's 9.8. So I'm going to try 9.8. Alright. Now you can look how the difference, look at the difference in the size of the dots going down. That's what you want to see. You want to see it going down smaller and smaller and smaller until you get to the smallest dot you can possibly recognize and try to discern the difference between. Okay. Now I'm going to go over again, and I'm going to alright, so there, this is 10.9. So again, okay, so now I got about the same size dot, and it's actually a little bit bigger than the other one. Alright, so one was at 9.8, this one is at 10.9. So I'd like to go somewhere in the middle. So let's go to, let's see, we'll go 10.4. So just somewhere roughly in the middle. Alright, so there's 10.4. Now this time, since I think I found my dot size that I want. Now I can tune it in, and what I want to do is I want to put it close to these dots, and try so I can have a good comparison. So we'll go ahead and do a pulse here. Alright. So that's actually still a little bit too big. So we'll go ahead and drop it down to, so here's 10. We have some smoke to clear up. Alright. There's actually 10.1. So we'll come back down. Alright. So now we're back down to where we were. Now just for the heck of it, I want to go ahead and I want to check my set autofocus. So right now we're at 10.1. I'm going to set my autofocus and compare it. Okay. So now I'm at my my normal focus depth. So I want to try and see what it's going to do here at 10.8. Okay. And 10.8 looks like it got it. It's actually just smaller than the smallest one I had already, which is kind of odd because the numbers changed, or from a lower number to a higher number. Alright. So now that I've got that done, I wanna go over the setting up your setting up your nozzle. All right. So the camera on the right is actually facing straight back to the machine. So what you're seeing here, I mean, it's at an angle. I apologize. Let me see if I can rotate that. Alright, there we are. So I'm looking straight back in the machine on the camera on the right. And you can see that the pointer is now off to the right a little bit of the cone. Now if you watch your screen, you're going to see the dot move as I turn the knob, and I'll let you see what I'm doing up here. So if you watch it, you'll see the dot start to move. Like right now it's moving further back. So I don't want that. I want to put it back in center. So I don't want to go left and right, so I don't want to use this one. I want to go up and down, so I'm going to use the bottom one. If you look here, you'll see it move. Now it's almost completely gone. Then it shows back up, and then you'll see it move across the table towards the other side. Okay? I've learned that you don't want to be afraid of moving these, because over time you're going to have to move them at some point. So now, if you look at it, it's dead center. Got a nice crisp circle. If I do a pulse, now I should have a nice clean, and I do. And actually the dot is now smaller. It looks bigger because it's close up, the camera's close up, but dot's actually smaller than the smallest one we had before. So now that that's all set up, you can re-verify your numbers just by redoing a pulse test. Because if you're back and forth between the dot or the pointer and trying to center up your nozzle, you're gonna be spinning your wheels, and that's all you're gonna be doing is going in circles. So that's the easiest way that I've found to do it. That's the way I do it. Like I said, I do this probably, I don't know, at least, like I said, at least once a month. The biggest thing is when you're doing this is look at what your light, see how the light is kind of reflecting differently as I move the nozzle. Okay. Now if you have your dot there, I just check mine. I'll tilt it one way and see how quickly it goes out, and then I'll tilt it another way, see how quickly, usually left and right, front and back, and to see if it's centered. You know, if it goes away really quick, then you know your beam is too close to the nozzle, and you need to adjust it, basically. And then you just adjust it. Like I said, if you need to go left or right, you'll use the this one here controls your left and right. Like I said, I use this one. I do not move it. This is my static or my constant point. This is for left and right, and the bottom one's for up and down. And then you got your tension screws here with the springs on them that just keeps tension down on the plate, which pushes this up and allows you to be able to adjust it. So, in a nutshell, it's basically what you're looking at as far as doing your numbers. And then again, here I'll show you your number. All right. So your number right here on your display is 10.8. Now, if I hit reset, that number's more than likely it's going to be like 3,000, unless for some reason it happened to remember your setting. But it's going to go back, give you your X, Y, and your Z. See, your Z is at 3,000. This is the point I was getting to, is if you restart your machine, it's just going to throw this number out there, which is completely an arbitrary number. It means nothing, other than the fact that it's basically a red flag saying, hey, you need to adjust me so I know where I'm at. And then that's where you do your autofocus. Then you go and do everything else. Because if you don't, honestly, I don't know what will happen. I've never not done it, so I'm not sure what will happen. But the way that's designed is, or the way it's functioning, that's just what it does when it resets. Because Z doesn't reset when you restart the machine or start it up in the morning, cold start or whatever. The machine doesn't know where Z is, because unless you put Z to auto home, which I wouldn't suggest, Z doesn't move, so it just throws out a number. You know, it'd be nice if it put question marks or something, but it just throws out a number that's, if you look at it, is obviously not possible, because the Z-axis is not 3,000 millimeters. So that's the way you can kind of tell what's going on with that. But it's just a good habit anyways. When you start your machine up for the first time, just do autofocus. In my situation, I really don't have to mess with it, or I do mess with it quite a bit, because I don't do a bunch of mass production stuff to where, you know, it's to where I have to not worry about redoing the settings. I can go from 1/2 inch, 1/4 inch to 3/4, back to half, to 1/8 inch, to paper, cardboard, whatever, and it just, so it does. I use it all the time. It's never failed me unless I did something wrong. Now, I'm hoping that this kind of answers some questions as far as sorry, I'm just reading some of the posts. I don't see anybody in here, which is fine. I'm sure people will see it after the fact. But at any rate, so yeah, I'm just going to hang out on here a little bit and answer any questions. I know it's probably early for some people in church, and for the West Coast, there's like nobody there, so they're probably still sleeping. But I'll just hang out, answer any questions if you have them, and I think I covered everything as far as the autofocus goes, unless there's a specific question from somebody that would like to ask. We can go over it or cover it. I don't rehearse any of these, so it's all off the cuff, so to speak. So I'll go over some stuff here in RDworks, just for the heck of it. Uh, we got our autofocus up here. You got your rotary down here for rotary engraving, and then your circle, pulse, and diameter. These are your normal settings for circle, pulse, and diameter for the rotary roller. And then you have the chuck, which is set up different. It's usually 10,000, and whatever your diameter of the object is you're engraving. If you have an object that's kind of it's tapered, like the Polar Camel or Yetis or whatever you're engraving on, you want to find like a happy medium and use that number for your thickness. If you're trying to do like a complete wrap, there's some guys on here that could probably help you with that. They do that. There's a couple people that do it quite often. So they might be able to help with settings on your diameters and circle pulse and all that stuff, because some of them they got them nailed. And so they might be able to help you out. But just for basic use, I never change it from these settings for the rotary, the roller. No matter what I'm doing, I don't change it. If I'm doing a double-sided cup, I'll literally do one side, flip it, and do it on the other. But the key to that is you want this to be centered top. At least I do. So you go center top, you'll do your engraving, then you'll roll it over 180 degrees to where this is in line on the other side with the center. Excuse me. Usually what I'll do is I'll take a grease pencil on my first couple cups. I'll put a mark right where the center line is before I do the first engraving, and then when I rotate it, I make sure that grease mark on the cup is parallel or vertical in line with the dot on the other side. And I've done it with tape. Put a piece of tape on the edge to mark it, and then once you do that and you get that position set, you can kind of pretty well eyeball where center is based on how that design is sitting underneath and where the center point is. And then if you're doing multiples, it just makes it so much easier, I think, to do that, because usually I'll go through one I'll go through one whole design, one side of the cup on all the cups, and then I'll come back and set up for the second one, and I'll run all them instead of going front back, and bouncing between images and stuff like that. Just do all of one up front, do all the other after that, and then you're done. I did 90 double-sided 20-ounce tumblers a while back, and it took me, if it was start to finish, it took me about 14 hours. But that's, obviously with switching things out 180 times to get the graphic. And plus that was with my fiber laser. I also have a Boss FM20 fiber laser that I use. And that's typically what I use for cups and tumblers. As a matter of fact, this is the one that I did. I had it my test cup. Because usually anytime I'll do anything, it doesn't matter if I've engraved on these cups a million times, I'll always have a test cup of the design I'm using. And sometimes, like this one here in particular, I mean it's been lasered on so many times it's not even funny. So I mean but what you can do with that is also you can wrap. I use blue painter's tape, wrap around the outside of it. It's not going to keep it from putting varnish on the cup, but at least you'll be able to see, is my design stretched? Is my design crunched together? Is my design look good? Is it taking up as much room? Because sometimes if you put a 4-inch on a tumbler, it could come out 3.5 or 4.25 or whatever. Sometimes it's just random. But knowing that up front and being able to adjust for it is pretty important. So I always have a test cup laying around to do stuff like that, because you might want some shading, which you could control with the power of the laser. Just like if you're doing a grayscale, it has different power for each setting. And if you're doing a stainless, like the cups I just showed you, these were done on my fiber laser. So, obviously I don't need to use Surmark or whatever other marking material you use. I don't have to use it on those, and that's what I usually do for my stainless. Is I'll throw them on the fiber laser. It's easier and quicker. And then, unless they want it to be black, obviously then I'll use Surmark. But for the CO2, you can use your just your regular Surmark. If you're doing a black or colored cup, it's good to find out the settings of the cup that you're using, because typically the settings will change depending on the cup you use and the brand, and sometimes even within the brand things will change, just because sorry, I got off track. So like I've had Polar Camels, for instance, and I had a batch that I used a particular power on, and I went to another batch of the same cup, of the same color, but they were from a different box. So when I did that, thinking, okay, it's going to be the same, it wasn't. I ended up needing more power for one than I did the other, and I made the corrections and then went on about my day. So it's easier to waste a cup and get your settings dialed in, at least the best you can, and you can adjust if necessary. But just be prepared to lose stuff. I mean, I've probably lost thousands of dollars over the years, not just with lasers, but with all the other stuff I do. I've lost thousands of dollars on material that I can't use, and I can't do nothing with, because it either failed or something was wrong with it. But generally, and the thing I like about JDS in particular, is if you get an account with them, if you can, but you have to have a tax ID and a retail certificate before, or resale certificate before they'll do business with you, because they don't do business with the general public. But once you do get an account with them, I had a case of tumblers that I got, and no matter what settings I used, no matter what I did, even talking to their sublimation, or not their sublimation, but their tech support, using different settings that they recommend, and just doing all that stuff. I mean, it was probably about an hour and a half on the phone with them. And the end result was because my warehouse, or JDS has a warehouse right down the road from me, so they just told me to go ahead and take the whole thing back. They actually told me to keep the ones that were screwed up, but I gave them back anyways because I don't have use for them. But I turned them in, they gave me my money back, they gave me a brand new box, and that box was fine. So that's what I like about working with JDS. If you have to mail it to them, they were going to mail it, send me a shipping label to mail it back, no charge. But knowing that I'm in Jacksonville and the warehouse is here in Jacksonville, I told them, I was like, no, I can just drop it off and I can come pick up another set. Just put me an order in for another set and I'll come get it. So that's really good with their customer support, and the guys are really willing to help you out um, in any way they can. And like I said, I spent almost an hour and a half probably with them on the phone, and the end result was, I was very pleased that they worked with me. And I've had them do that with sublimation stuff too. But they stand behind their work, their products. So is anybody awake out there in TV land or in computer world, internet? Anybody hear me? I think my audio is working. I see the bars going back and forth. I got a new microphone right here. Because when I'm doing videos around the shop, I'll take my camera and link it to this, or my phone, and use the camera and link it to this, but it won't pick up audio. So I got this so I can move around the shop. I mean, granted, this shop is not very big, but I got a bigger shop on the other side of the door there, where my woodwork and compressor and all that stuff is. So, yeah. Well, I'm going to end this. I'm going to start another video. I want to talk about air systems, because my last video I did, my phone wasn't working, or the audio wasn't working for my phone, so you couldn't really hear what I was saying. So I'm going to end this one over tap and do another one here in a minute, going over the air system, and then we'll see where we're at with people and if anybody has any questions or whatnot. So check out the other video. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact me. Like, share, subscribe, ring the bell, all that good stuff if you want to see new stuff as it comes out. I hope everybody has a good day, and we'll talk to you next time. And as always, laser like a boss.